These mice lived in paradise. No hunger, no predators, no disease. They had everything, a perfect society, and yet they all died.
Hold on. They had everything. Food, water, no enemies? And they all died anyway?
Every single one, to the last.
But why?
That's the question that consumed John Calhoun for his entire life. And the answer he found is more unsettling than any disease he could have diagnosed. In 1968, an American scientist built the perfect home for mice. Unlimited food, unlimited water, no predators, no disease. He called it Universe 25, and he expected to witness the most thriving mouse experiment of all time.
Honestly, sounds like a dream.
That's what he thought too. 5 years later, every single mouse was dead, and no vet in the world could have named the cause of death. Because what died in Universe 25 wasn't the body. It was something no scalpel would ever find. And if you watch this until the end, you'll understand why Calhoun believed the same thing could happen to us.
Chapter 1. The Experiment. Universe 25. Universe 25 wasn't a spontaneous experiment. It was the 25th in a long series. Calhoun had already observed the same pattern 24 times before. Always no shortage, always the same ending. The enclosure was 9 square meters, packed with feeding stations that never ran dry and water that never ran out. Calhoun calculated the space could comfortably hold 3,800 mice. On day 1, he placed 8 founder mice inside. For the first 104 days, almost nothing happened. The mice explored the enclosure, figured out who slept where. Then the first litters were born. The population doubled every 55 days. By day 315, over 600 animals were living in the enclosure.
Sounds like the subway at rush hour.
Exactly. And that's precisely when everything started to fall apart. In a normal colony, surplus animals migrate. They find new territory. In Universe 25, there was no new territory. There was no way out. And that was the moment the experiment stopped being a paradise. Chapter 2. The Behavioral Sink. When society collapses. What Calhoun observed next, he called the behavioral sink. And it's one of the most disturbing findings in all of behavioral research. Even though food was available everywhere, the mice began compulsively crowding at just a few specific stations. Empty stations, no matter how accessible, were ignored. The presence of others had burned itself so deeply into the feeding instinct that eating alone simply no longer worked. At the same time, the male population split into 2 groups. The first, young males with no territory, no role, no purpose. They drifted toward the center of the enclosure. When one was attacked, it didn't fight back. It lay there, took the damage, got up, walked a few steps, and lay down again. The second group was the exact opposite. Frantic, erratic, ruthless. They ignored mating rituals, invaded other nests, couldn't even be stopped by force.
That sounds like 2 different ways of giving up.
Exactly. One group stopped fighting, the other stopped needing reasons. Both are collapse, just wearing different faces.
Chapter 3. The Mothers. When Care Dies.
What happened to the mothers next is the darkest part of the entire experiment. The males who had claimed territories were exhausted from constant defense. They stopped protecting their families. The mothers had to defend the nests themselves while still nursing. The pressure was too much. They turned on their own young. Some abandoned them at random spots in the enclosure. Others stopped recognizing which pups were theirs. In the worst sections of the colony, mothers began eating their own offspring. In some areas, fewer than 1 in 20 newborns survived to weaning. Calhoun later wrote, "The social fabric of the colony was, at this point, effectively dead. The bodies were still alive. The structure that held them together as a species was not."
That's
That's actually the saddest thing I've ever heard.
It is. And the pups that did survive grew up in a world where no one showed them what a functioning life looked like. What they became is something that stayed with Calhoun for the rest of his life.
Chapter 4. The Beautiful Ones. The Death of the Spirit.
The pups that survived became something Calhoun had never seen before. The males of this generation never fought, never attempted to mate, never engaged socially in any way. They ate, they slept, and they groomed themselves obsessively for hours over and over. Their coats were flawless because they had never been in a single fight. They moved through the colony as if no other mouse existed. Calhoun called them the beautiful ones. Outwardly, the healthiest looking mice in the entire colony, but functionally, already dead. Their nervous systems had developed in a world where every social role was already taken. There was nothing to win, nothing to defend, nothing to become. So they opted out of the species. Not consciously, but irreversibly.
I know that feeling. Not because I'm a mouse, but because sometimes I just don't want anything, don't need anything. I'm just there.
I know. And that's exactly why this experiment matters. Not because of the mice. By day 560, the population had peaked at 2,200 animals. The last successful conception occurred on day 920. After that, no new mice were born. On May 23rd, 1973, the last mouse in Universe 25 died.
Chapter 5. What really killed them? The role.
When Calhoun's paper was published, the world read it wrong. The headline became, "Comfort Kills, Abundance Destroys." But that's not what Calhoun actually said. His real conclusion: when the number of individuals who could fill meaningful roles far exceeds the number of roles available, only violence and decay can follow. The killer wasn't comfort. The killer was the disappearance of meaningful roles. As the population grew faster than the colony could generate roles, the mice without a place stopped functioning. The fighters had no one left to fight. The mothers had no nests anyone could defend. The young grew up with nothing to inherit. The food never ran out. The water never ran out. What ran out was something no one had thought to build into the paradise.
A purpose.
A purpose, a role, a reason to be part of something. Comfort didn't kill them. It just removed the friction that had made life feel like it meant something.
Chapter 6. Calhoun was no doomer, the hope.
Here's the part almost no one quotes, and it's the most important part. Calhoun wasn't a pessimist. He didn't spend the rest of his career predicting collapse. He spent it trying to prevent it. He kept building new universes. He kept changing the variables. He kept searching for the one thing he could build into a paradise to make it last. And he believed he'd found it. He wrote, "As physical space contracts, the only way forward is to expand into conceptual space, into ideas, into networks, into the work of creating roles that did not previously exist." He called this ideational generativity. The way out is to keep creating new reasons to be here, to invent new roles, to construct meaning, rather than waiting for someone to hand it to you.
So the mice couldn't do that, but we can?
The mice had no choice. They couldn't decide to invent a new role. We can. That's the only but decisive difference between Universe 25 and what's happening around us right now.
Chapter 7. The Psychological Profile. Are you a beautiful one?
Calhoun wrote that the mice died 2 deaths. The first was the death of the spirit. The second was the death of the body. The first happened years before the second. And now the uncomfortable question: how many people do you know, or perhaps you yourself, who function on the outside but have already stopped looking for a role on the inside, who eat, sleep, scroll, whose coat is immaculate because they have never gotten into a single real fight, who have withdrawn from the social game, not out of strength, but because the roles already seemed taken? This is not a judgment. it's a diagnosis. And Calhoun himself would have insisted that a diagnosis is not a death sentence. The beautiful ones in Universe 25 had no choice. They could not decide to be different. Their nervous systems had been shaped in a world that gave them no template for a functioning life. You have that template. You have the ability to create a role that did not previously exist, to construct a meaning that nobody needs to hand you. This is not self-help rhetoric. This is literally what Calhoun identified as the only way out of the pattern he had observed 25 times.
I think I need to stop grooming my coat for a moment.
That would be a start. Universe 25 was a perfect paradise, and it went completely extinct. Not from disease, not from hunger, but because the one thing that truly keeps something alive was never built into it, a reason to be part of something. The mice had no choice. We still do. Do you recognize yourself in the beautiful ones? Or do you know someone who fits? Write it in the comments and tell us, what is your role? What keeps you alive?